weeks before her father's arrest, Emily found herself sitting alone in the quiet barracks lounge at Fort Carson, staring at the glowing screen of her phone. The silence in the lounge was a physical thing, thick and textured, broken only by the low hum of the vending machine in the corner, and the distant, rhythmic crunch of a guard's boots on gravel outside. It was 2300 hours. Emily Carter, Staff Sergeant Emily Carter, sat rigid on a worn vinyl couch, the green fabric cool against her palms. Her phone was a rectangle of harsh light in the dim room, a portal to a world of noise that felt galaxies away. The inbox was a scroll of validation. "Yeah, Carter. Promotion party this weekend. From Rodriguez, a formal, congratulations on your well-deserved advancement, Staff Sergeant." From Captain Sharma, a string of heart emojis, and "so per you do." From her best friend since basic, Jess. Even her platoon sergeant had sent a succinct, "Good work. Now the real work begins." Each message was a brick in the wall of the life she had built with her own two hands. A life of order, merit, and earned respect. Yet, the wall felt hollow because at its center was a gaping, father-shaped hole. He hadn't called. Not after the awkward, tense dinner at the steakhouse where he'd mocked her costume. Not after the somber memorial service for fallen engineers from her battalion, where she'd stood at parade rest for an hour, her dress blues a shield against grief. And not now, not after the promotion notice, her name in bold print, Carter E., had been pinned to the main bulletin board, outside the mess hall for 72 hours. 72 hours of public acknowledgement that his daughter was now a non-commissioned officer, a leader of soldiers. The military grapevine was efficient, he would know. He always had ways of knowing things, a skill she once found mysterious and now found ominous. Her thumb hovered over his contact, Dad. A simple, aching word. The last message was from her, sent the morning after the steakhouse incident. "Thanks for dinner. Talk soon." It had been read. There was no reply. It was as if every flicker of pride he'd shown in the wake of General Anderson's salute. The stunned silence in the car. The gruff, "I didn't know they saluted you," had been extinguished, swallowed by the old, familiar habits that always dragged him back into the fortress of his silence. That silence was his true weapon, more punishing than any criticism. It made her accomplishments feel like illusions, her pride a childish indulgence. She tried to focus, to shove the static from her mind. Her days were a blur of purposeful activity, leading PT at 0530, teaching a class on communication equipment maintenance, running tactical exercises in the simulation building. She was good at it. She commanded respect, her voice firm, her instructions clear. But in the quiet moments, during the lull of a night watch, in the shower, here in this empty lounge, her mind became a traitorous theater. It replayed the steakhouse on a loop, the warmth of the restaurant, the smell of seared meat and baked potato. Her father, David Carter, in a crisp button, down, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "So, you're still playing soldier?" he'd asked, the mocking tone a velvet glove over an iron fist. Then the way his gaze had swept over her Class B uniform, lingering on her ribbons, the Army Achievement Medal, the Good Conduct Medal, as if they were trinkets from a carnival. "It's a sharp look, Em. Really?" The condescension was a cold knife twisting in her gut. She'd spent an hour polishing her brass that evening. And then the pivot. The sudden shift in the atmosphere as General Anderson, a legend in the engineer corps, had approached their table. The old warrior's eyes had found hers, recognized the uniform, the rank. Without a word to her father, he'd stopped, drawn himself up, and rendered a crisp, perfect salute. "Staff Sergeant," he'd said, his voice gravelly with respect. Her body had moved on instinct, snapping to attention, returning the salute. "General, sir." The look on her father's face in that moment was etched into her memory. Confusion, first. Then a dawning, bewildered realization. The joke, it turned out, was on him. The pride that surged in her then was fierce and bright, a supernova in her chest. But it was instantly alloyed with a searing pain, that it had taken the validation of a stranger to force a crack in her father's disdain. Pride and pain had fused inside her into a single, heavy, and unnameable alloy. A cold weight she carried with her still. She couldn't untangle them. The pride was inseparable from the hurt that had necessitated it. A gust of wind rattled the lounge window, snapping her back to the present. The phone screen dimmed. The messages of congratulations seemed to blur into a meaningless glow. With a sharp exhale, she stood up, the movement stiff. She needed air, something to shock the cycle of her thoughts. pulling on her fleece jacket over her shirt and sweatpants. She pushed through the heavy door and into the Colorado night. The cold was a slap, clean and brutal. It was a clear night, the sky a vast black dome pierced by a spray of icy stars over the Rockies' dark silhouette. Her breath plumed in front of her, a ghostly echo of her inner turmoil. She walked a familiar path along the sidewalk, the frozen grass crunching faintly under a dusting of snow. The base was quiet. Here, she was safe. Here, the rules were clear. Then, her phone buzzed in her pocket. Not a call. A single, sharp vibration of a text notification. She pulled it out, the light making her squint. The sender was a string of 10 digits she didn't recognize. No area code she knew. The message was terse, devoid of any identifying mark. Enterprise Way, Suite 4B, Colorado Springs, 1400. There's it. No, hello, no from a friend. No explanation. Just an address, a time, and an implicit command. Every nerve ending in her body fired at once. Military training didn't just teach you how to shoot or march. It rewired your brain for threat assessment. Ambiguity was the enemy. Ignorance got people killed. Guesswork was a luxury for civilians. This message was a rock thrown into the still pond of her night, and the ripples felt dangerous. Her first, trained instinct was not to wonder, but to report. Her fingers were cold, but they moved swiftly, pulling up the contact for Monroe, FBI. It had been months since she'd last needed to call. Since the last cryptic warning from her father had sent her into the arms of federal investigators. She'd hoped never to see this number again. Agent Theresa Monroe answered on the third ring, her voice alert despite the hour. Carter, what is it? I just got a text. From an unknown number. Emily's own voice sounded strangely calm, detached from the adrenaline starting to hum in her veins. Read it to me. Exactly. Emily did. The line went so quiet, she could hear the faint hiss of the open connection, or maybe it was the wind in her ears. The silence stretched, 5 seconds, 10. Far too long for a federal agent dealing with a potential lead. Emily, Monroe finally said, and the use of her first name sent a fresh chill down her spine. Monroe was always professional, always Carter. Where are you right now? Outside my barracks, Fort Carson. Stay there. Do not, under any circumstances, go to that address. Do not attempt to contact that number. Do you understand? Yes. What is it? Another pause, briefer this time. That address, it's a commercial property. A shell corporation called Front Range Logistics is the tenant of record. It's a name that has come up in the investigation into your father's activities. Unofficially. The world seemed to tilt. The cold air felt suddenly thin, insufficient. Emily's grip tightened on the phone. She had tried, so desperately, in the weeks since the dinner, to cling to the fragile hope that his awkward attempts, his presence at the memorial signaled a change, that maybe the man who had saluted her in the car, however clumsily, was the real one emerging. But the truth about David Carter was a shadow that no amount of wishful sunlight could dispel. It always crept back, longer and darker than before. As he in trouble? The question is automatic, a daughter's question, not a soldier's. We're looking into it, Monroe said, her voice returning to its professional cadence. This could be nothing. A wrong number. A prank. Or it could be a signal. Either way, you are not to engage. You are a potential asset to this investigation, Emily, but you are also a potential target. Your safety is paramount. I need you to go inside, lock your door, and act normal. I'll be in touch. I'm going to look into this number and this reminder immediately. A reminder. Emily caught the slip. A beat. An appointment. You know what I mean. Go inside, Carter, now. The call ended. Emily stood frozen, the phone now a dead weight in her hand. She stared at the screen until it went black, reflecting the faint starlight and her own pale, wide-eyed face. She looked down at the snow-covered ground, at the perfect, untouched layer of white along the edge of the sidewalk. Her breath came in quick, pale clouds that dissipated into the vast, indifferent night. The fear was a two-headed beast. One head hissed that her father was still lying, still tangled in the same murky dealings that had haunted her childhood, the hushed phone calls, the sudden business trips, the suitcases of cash she'd once glimpsed and been told to forget. The other, more terrifying head whispered that this was it. The moment the curtain was finally ripped away. That the cryptic message was a key, and it was being offered to her. Did she want to see what was behind the door? Surrounded by the profound silence of the sleeping base, a silence meant to signify peace and order, and crushed under the accumulated weight of all the questions, accusations, and silences she had tried to outrun by enlisting. Emily realized something with a clarity that felt like a shard of ice in her heart. This wasn't just a family problem anymore. It wasn't about a distant, disapproving father and a daughter seeking approval. The FBI was involved. Shell corporations were involved. Anonymous messages were being sent a soldier on a secure military base. Her father's world, a world she had spent her adult life defining herself against, was intersecting with her world, the one she had built as a sanctuary. This text was the sound of that collision. It was the opening of a door she had never intended to approach, let alone walk through. Her legs felt weak. She leaned against the cold brick wall of the barracks, the roughness scraping through her jacket. She thought of Fairfield, the cramped house that always smelled of stale cigarettes and anxiety, the feeling of being small, of waiting for the other shoe to drop, of understanding that her family was different in ways that were never explained but always felt dangerous. But she wasn't there anymore. She pushed herself off the wall, standing at her full height. She was Staff Sergeant Emily Carter. She had led soldiers through training exercises under live fire. She had commanded respect from grizzled sergeants and fresh-faced generals alike. She had earned every stitch on her uniform, every ounce of authority in her voice. Whatever was coming, whether it was a reckoning with her father's lies, a confrontation with the dangerous truths he courted, or both, she would not face it as a scared girl from a broken home. She would face it as what she was, a soldier, armed not with a weapon, though she was proficient with several, but with the things she had truly earned: her discipline, her courage, her integrity, and a deep understanding that some fronts weren't marked on any map, and the most important battles were often fought in the quiet, just before the storm. She took one last look at the stars, then turned and walked back to the barracks door. Her steps were no longer hesitant. They were measured, deliberate. The decision was made. She wouldn't recklessly chase the mystery, not against orders. But she would be ready. For the truth, for the fallout. For whatever her father had dragged to her doorstep. She had spent years building a fortress of her own. It was time to see if it could withstand the siege. The next 48 hours were an exercise in controlled tension. Emily moved through her duties with robotic precision. She led her squad on a 5-mile run, her voice barking cadence while her mind replayed Monroe's words. Unofficially, she taught a class on encrypted radio protocols, her explanations clear, her hands steady as she demonstrated the equipment, while a part of her wondered what kind of communication, front-range logistics, used. She checked her phone obsessively, but the unknown number was silent. No follow-up, no clarification. It just sat in her messages, a digital landmine. She heard nothing from Monroe either. The silence from both ends was maddening. On the second evening, she was in her room, polishing her boots for the next day's formation, when her personal phone rang. Not the unknown number. Her father. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She stared at the screen, the rhythmic buffing of her boot forgotten. The urge to let it go to voicemail was powerful. To maintain her own silence, a weapon she had learned from him, but the soldier in her knew that intelligence was gathered by engaging with the enemy, not retreating. She answered. Dad. Emily. His voice was strained, too hearty. How are you? How's everything, base? It's fine. Busy. She kept her tone neutral, flat. What's up? Oh, nothing. Just checking in. Heard about the promotion. That's really something. The praise felt forced, an afterthought. Listen, I was thinking maybe we could have lunch this week. Catch up properly. Without any interruptions. He meant General Anderson. Emily's eyes drifted to her laptop, where she had discreetly searched for 7821 Enterprise Way earlier. It was in a bland, mid-range office park on the east side of the Springs, the kind of place for insurance adjusters and struggling startups. Not for David Carter, who preferred downtown power lunches or his own plush, opaque office. When were you thinking? She asked. Thursday work for you? I could come to you, meet near the base. Thursday, 1400 hours. The time from the text, the coincidence was a thunderclap in the quiet room. It was no coincidence. This was the play, a lunch invitation as cover, a misdirection. Thursday's no good, she said, her voice miraculously steady. I have a field exercise all day. Could run late. A pause on his end. She could almost hear the gears turning, the recalculating. Oh, that's a shame. Friday. Maybe. I'll have to check my training schedule. It's pretty packed these next couple weeks. She was lying with a ease that disgusted her. She was mirroring him, becoming a reflection of his evasions. Right. Of course. The army comes first. There was an edge to his voice now. A frustration he was trying to mask. Well, let me know. I'd really like to see you. I'll check my calendar and text you. She said. The promise hollow. I've got to go, Dad. Duty calls. She hung up before he could reply, her hand trembling slightly. The conversation was a confirmation. He was maneuvering. Why did he want to see her? To explain, to warn her off, to use her. The not knowing was a vacuum, and her mind rushed to fill it with terrible possibilities. An hour later, her official military phone buzzed with a secure message. It was from an internal server she didn't recognize. Skeet Carter report to Building T7, Conference Room 2, 0900 tomorrow. Civies capped, Sharma will meet you, Office of the Base JH, the Judge Advocate General, the Army's lawyers, a cold dread. Different from the fear her father inspired, seeped into her. This was institutional. This was her world reacting. The next morning, she wore jeans and a plain sweater, feeling naked without her uniform. Building T7 was administrative, nondescript. Captain Sharma, her company commander, was waiting outside a sealed conference room. Her face was unreadable, a professional mask. Carter, come in. The room was small, dominated by a table. Seated was a lean man in an army service uniform with the branched insignia of the JAG Corps, a major, and a woman in a severe Navy pantsuit, Agent Monroe. Staff Sergeant Carter, I'm Major Davies. The JAG officer said. Please sit. This is Agent Theresa Monroe of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. You've met. Emily sat, folding her hands in her lap to hide their slight tremble. Yes, sir. Monroe gave her a small, acknowledging nod. Her expression was grave. Emily. We've traced the number that sent you the text. It's a burner purchased for cash 3 days ago in Denver. Untraceable beyond that. The address, however, is active. Front Range Logistics is a corporate veil, but we have reason to believe it's a node in a network we're investigating. A network involving illicit financial transfers and procurement of dual-use technology. Technology with military applications. Emily asked, her training cutting through the jargon. Precisely. Major Davies interjected, his voice clipped. The Army takes the compromise of its personnel, especially its NCOs, extremely seriously. You have received what appears to be an attempt at clandestine contact. This places you in a unique and sensitive position. Monroe leaned forward. Your father called you last night. He proposed a meeting for Thursday at 1400. It wasn't a question, they were monitoring him. Or her. Or both. The surveillance was a palpable new layer in the room. Yes, Emily said. We believe the text you received was a failsafe. Monroe continued. A way for someone in that network to make contact if your father was compromised or became unreliable. They may see you as a potential conduit, or a vulnerability to be assessed. Your father's lunch invitation may be an attempt to control the situation, to get to you before they do, or to facilitate an introduction. The pieces were slotting into a horrifying picture. She wasn't just the daughter of a person of interest. She was now a square on the game board herself. What do you need me to do? Emily heard herself ask. The soldier was in control now, the daughter locked away. Major Davies and Monroe exchanged a look. For now, nothing, Davies said. You will continue your duties. You will not go to that address. You will, however, agree to meet your father for lunch on Thursday. Emily's head snapped up. Sir, we will coordinate the location, a place of our choosing, with full surveillance. You will wear a wire. Your objective is to gather intelligence. Let him lead the conversation. See if he references the text, the address, or any of his associates. Your primary mission is your own safety. Your secondary mission is information. Davies's eyes were hard. This is a voluntary request, Staff Sergeant, but it is a significant opportunity to aid your country and, potentially, to clarify your father's situation. Do you understand the parameters? A wire. Spying on her own father. The daughter recoiled in horror. The soldier saw the tactical advantage. The woman who had spent a lifetime seeking his approval now saw a chance to uncover the truth that had always been denied to her. I understand, sir, she said, her voice a thread of steel. I'll do it. Monroe's gaze held hers. There was a flicker of something, pity, respect, warning. We'll brief you extensively on Wednesday. Safe handling, protocol, emergency signals. You will not be alone, Emily. Not for a second. The meeting ended with a blur of instructions. As she walked out with Captain Sharma, her commander placed a hand briefly on her shoulder. Carter. This is beyond the scope of anything you should have to handle. You're a hell of a soldier. Remember that in there. Don't let the personal override the professional. I won't, ma'am, Emily said. But the words felt like ash in her mouth. The next day was a haze. The detailed briefing from Monroe and a technical agent was clinical. They fitted her with a microphone and then a button, embedded in the clasp of a necklace they provided. They rehearsed scenarios. What if he asked about the base? What if he gave her a package? What if he became agitated? The emergency signal was to touch the necklace twice and say, I need to use the restroom. They chose the location, a moderately busy family-style restaurant off post, chosen for its clear sightlines and multiple exits. She was to act normally, but nervous about the promotion, about life on base. To be a daughter, not a sergeant. Wednesday night, she didn't sleep. She lay in her bunk, staring at the ceiling, the necklace a cold weight on her nightstand. She thought of all the lies that had built her childhood home. The import-export business. The consulting trips. The sudden influxes of money that bought her a used car at 16, followed by months of tension and whispered arguments behind closed doors. Her mother had been a ghost in that house, fading a little more with each secret, until she finally left when Emily was 17, a decision Emily had blamed her for until she put on the uniform and learned what true duty and sacrifice looked like. Now, she was being asked to weaponize those childhood skills of listening at doors, of parsing tone, of sensing danger. She was to become the spy in her father's midst. Thursday arrived bleak and overcast. She was given the morning off training. At 1300, a plainclothes agent in a nondescript satin picked her up at a designated spot outside the PX. He was introduced only as Mark. He drove in silence. In the parking lot of the restaurant, he went over the final checks. We'll be in the van across the lot. We'll hear everything. You see this? He pointed to a man in a Broncos jacket, sitting on a bench outside the restaurant entrance, reading a paper. That's Paul. He's your primary overwatch. You get the signal, you get to him, understood? Understood. Good luck, Sergeant. She walked into the restaurant at 13:55. It was warm, smelling of fried food and coffee. She spotted her father immediately, seated in a booth at the back, just as surveillance had said he would be. He stood as she approached, a stiff, unnatural movement. He was trying to smile. Emily, you look tired. Long week, she said, sliding into the booth opposite him. The vinyl seat creaked. She was hyper, aware of the tiny microphone pressed against her sternum, of the weight of the listening team just outside. I'm glad you could make it, he said, signaling to a waitress. He ordered a coffee. Emily asked for a water. The mundane ritual was surreal. So, he began after the waitress left. His eyes darted around the restaurant, not meeting hers. The promotion, it's a big deal. It is. I know I haven't always been the most supportive about the army. He fidgeted with a napkin. It's a hard life. I just wanted something easier for you. The old excuse. Wrapped in concern, masking control. I'm good at it, Dad. It's what I want. He nodded, finally looking at her. His eyes were bloodshot, the lines on his face deeper than she remembered. He looked like a man under immense strain. I know you are. I saw that. With the general. He took a deep breath. Listen, Em. Things are complicated for me right now. Business-wise. There are some people, some associates who aren't happy. There's been some misunderstandings. This was it. He was circling the drain. What kind of misunderstandings? She asked, keeping her voice light. Concerned, daughter, concerned. Financial. Contractual. He waved a hand dismissively, but the gesture was tense. Point is, it might get messy. And I need you to be careful. Careful how? He leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice. If anyone tries to contact you, anyone you don't know, about me, about business, you need to ignore it. Don't answer. Don't engage, it's important. Her pulse was a drumbeat in her ears. He was warning her off the text, confirming its origin was tied to his world. Why would anyone contact me? She asked, feigning ignorance. Just because you're my daughter. They might think they can get to me through you. They'd be wrong, but just promise me. You'll stay out of it. Focus on your army life. It's a clean life. A good life. Keep it that way. There was a raw, desperate plea in his eyes that she had never seen before. It wasn't just manipulation. It was fear. For her, or for himself. Dad, are you in trouble? Real trouble. You can tell me. She reached across the table, placing her hand over his. A daughter's gesture, meant to elicit confession. The wire pressed between her palm and his knuckles. He flinched, almost imperceptibly, and pulled his hand back to wrap around his coffee mug. It's nothing I can't handle. Just some loose ends. But I need to know you're safe, that you're far away from it. His eyes locked onto hers, intense. There's an address. Some people might mention a place on Enterprise Way. You hear that? You run the other way. You understand, you don't go near it. He had said it. The address. The confirmation was now recorded, digitized, and streaming to a van outside. A part of her felt a savage triumph. Another part felt a profound, collapsing sorrow. Okay, Dad, she whispered. I promise. The rest of the lunch was a stilted pantomime. He asked about her work, but didn't seem to hear the answers. He paid the bill with cash, a thick wad of it. When they walked out into the gray afternoon light, he hugged her goodbye, a rare awkward embrace. He held on a second too long. I love you, Emily. He murmured into her hair. Remember what I said. Then he was gone, walking quickly to his luxury SUV. She stood on the sidewalk, watching him drive away, the necklace feeling like a brand against her skin. Paul, the agent on the bench, folded his newspaper and stood up. He gave her a slight nod, then ambled towards the parking lot. Her ride would be along in a moment. In the silence after her father's departure, the two truths she had been holding finally coalesced. The first, her father was deeply, criminally involved in something dangerous, and he knew the walls were closing in. The second, he had, in his own twisted way, just tried to protect her, to keep his shadow from touching her uniform. But it was too late. The shadow had already fallen. And Staff Sergeant Emily Carter was now officially on the unseen front, a soldier in a war she never enlisted for, fighting for a truth that might destroy the last fragments of the father she still, desperately, wanted to believe in. The door was open, and she was already through it,